Sneako's arguments against Christianity backfire badly. This is a video by Whaddo You Meme. Without further ado, let's watch.
Now, the famous influencer Sneako has been consistently giving everyone 5 reasons for why he recently embraced Islam and why he rejects Christianity. Now, there's a lot of people saying that he only converted to Islam because Andrew Tate did, but I personally don't know the man's motives and won't jump to any conclusions. However, if he is being sincere in the reasons that he gives, then we should expect for Sneako to leave Islam and embrace Christianity by the time that he's done watching this video. The reason why is because the 5 reasons that he gives, if he wants to be consistent, are the very things that should actually cause him to reject Islam and instead become a Christian. So, don't believe me?
Yeah, I'm intrigued and very interested.
I'll prove it. Let's start with his first reason.
Why I resonate with Islam, why it makes sense for me, because it's weird. It doesn't make sense to me to pray to a man. I don't want to submit to a man. The only person that we should submit to and that we should pray to should be the one creator of the universe, which is Allah. He created the universe and we love him for it. Perfect. That really, it makes the most sense to me.
So as you just heard, Sneako doesn't like the idea of submitting to a man and therefore decided to reject Christianity and to embrace Islam. But unfortunately, if Sneako really does have a problem with submitting to a man, then he should reject Islam. The reason why is because, according to the Quran, Sneako is actually commanded to submit to Muhammad, who's a man. So if this
Is he playing with words here? Because submit, if I understand correctly, right? The issue with submitting to a man is submission, in full submission, worshipping, obeying fully, in the sense that, to God, not like obeying the instruction of a prophet, right? For example, if we look at, let me see, let's just take what he cited here. I don't remember this verse, Surah 4, which is Surah An-Nisa. You can open up the Quran as well to see, because he just cited like this, right? Verse 64. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Surah An-Nisa verse 64. Wa ma arsalna mir rasulin illa liyuta'a bi iznillah. We do not send from the prophets illa liyuta'a bi iznillah, except for you to obey them with the permission of Allah. What's the issue with there? Is there anything close to be equal to worshipping Jesus? Right? I mean, is he making this video just for those who will not actually make any, take the time to check the verse and hence assume what he says carries weight and holds water? Is that it? And he play around, you say you do not want to submit to a man, and Quran says submit, when the word is not submit, ati'a, liyuta'a, ta'a, it's obeying, like we are Allah command us to obey our parent. So as long as the parent do not command us to do something that is violating the rights of God, like if our parent command us to worship idol, we cannot obey. But other than that, buy me food, etc., right, we have to obey, right? That's the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So obeying your parent, obeying the prophets, etc., is not in any way, shape or form similar to submitting, as in worshipping Jesus, the human being. So this is bizarre. The first point he's making is already making me feeling that this whole video will not be of any substance.
There's a real reason for why Sneako rejects Christianity, then he should also reject Islam. But what's even more interesting is the reason that he gives for why he thinks that he should only worship Allah. He said that he only wants to worship Allah because Allah is God, Allah is the creator of the universe, and therefore we should love him for it. But ironically, in Christianity, Jesus is God. He created the entire universe. So why does Sneako have a problem with worshiping Jesus in Christianity? Well, the reason why is because Sneako seems to have a problem with Jesus being both God and man. Fair enough. So for argument's sake, let's go ahead and say that Jesus isn't God and that he's only a man. So if you have to submit to a man in both Islam and Christianity.
False statement. The foundation of the question is false, because he actually built up a false statement about Islam, as if Islam teach to submit to a man in the same way as Christianity say to submit to Jesus. And then based on that, he built up the question, which is false, basically.
then who does Sneako think is the more rational person to submit to? On the one hand, we have Muhammad, who...
So this reasoning is interesting because he created a false foundation, built a question upon it, which is based on a false foundation, and then going off on a tangent, comparing the character of the two prophets. Because this video, I can understand if it is more of, meaning they don't care what the Muslim will see when they watch about this video, and the flaw and fallacy that they can detect. But it's more of to addressing the Christians so that they still feel good about what they believe in. Right? This kind of video tend to address that. I'm not saying that only Christians do that. Some Muslims do as such. When they do not even address the other person's point, they just continue to say fluffy things just to make us feel good, right? So those kind of videos I don't think have any substance, and I really don't like those kind of videos, including this one so far.
Wasn't born of a virgin.
So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a human being like the rest of us, do have sin.
Needed forgiveness for his sins.
The promise of God is that he does forgive sins, and his promise in the Quran is that he has forgiven the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for his sins past and future.
And according to Sneako, he wasn't perfect and did some questionable things.
Are you against grooming?
Yeah, it's gross.
How do you feel about like the fact that Muhammad like married a 9-year-old girl?
I don't know how true that is.
But I don't think any Muslims deny it.
If that's true, then he's not. Then nobody's perfect.
So if Sneako...
I'm not sure how many. Okay, number one, I'm not sure the context of this conversation. Number two, I'm not sure how well versed Sneako is with Islamic discussion, including on those topics. So yeah. And number three, if any Muslim or Sneako who just recently becoming Muslim is ill-informed about certain things in Islam, including the issue of Aisyah marriage to the Prophet Muhammad SAW, whatever they say out of ignorance doesn't really mean that you actually have caused problem to Islam itself, right? So normally I'm not that much affected by it, but sometimes I'm concerned whether the audience will understand the nuance behind those things.
Doesn't have a problem with submitting to a man like Muhammad, who, even according to him, wasn't morally perfect, then why would he have a problem submitting to...
What? Are you saying that all this verse is saying Muhammad is not morally perfect? Really? Let's okay, again, Surah 4, 105. Because I'm interested, because the way he says, as if the Quran endorsed that idea. It would be different if the Quran says something and then you impose your moral judgment on the Quran. Then that's not the Quran itself, it's more of you imposing something on the Quran. So I'm just interested to see what is this verse. 105. Auzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Inna anzalna ilaikal kitaba bil haqqi litahkuma bainan nasi bima araka Allah wa la takun lil kha'inina khasima. Okay, I'm not sure what's the problem here. Allah said inna anzalna ilaikal kitab. Indeed, we have sent to you kitab bil haq, with truth, litahkuma bainan nas, to litahkum, to judge, loosely translated to judge bainan nas, among human being, bima araka Allah, right, from what Allah have sent, right, wala takun lil kha'inina khasima, and then wastaghfirillah inna Allah kana ghafuran rahima. Is it from here? Or the next verse, 107. وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ خَوَّانًا أَثِيمًا. Okay, so this verse are giving instruction. It doesn't imply Prophet Muhammad SAW actually have the problem that is instructed to be avoided, right? So I'm not sure how he can use this verse to say that Muhammad SAW have a characteristic issues or anything. So, and if even the first line is problematic, doesn't even support his idea, it just does he just put all those numbers to make it as if what he says carries, some weight? So bizarre.
A man like Muhammad, who, even according to him, wasn't morally perfect, then why would he have a problem submitting to someone like Jesus, who, even according to Islam, was born of a virgin, performed miracles, and wasn't a sinner? If submitting to a man really is a problem for Sneako, then he should reject Islam, since it requires Muslims to submit to Muhammad. And if he decides to have...
So I just want to reiterate, that is false from the beginning. We have clarified that, but he keeps on going as if that is true.
A change of mind and conclude that he's actually okay with submitting to a man, then once we compare Jesus and Muhammad, even according to Sneako's own standards, then it makes a lot more sense for him to be a Christian and not a Muslim. Now, let's move on.
Does that statement underlyingly means that Christians actually do not have much issue with submitting to a man, and we submit to a man that is much better than other men? Is that the underlying meaning of his statement? Because Muslims will say, no, we never submit. If any Muslim says, I want to worship Prophet Muhammad SAW, no, that's wrong. That's shirk. That's the biggest sin ever, right? All Muslims would say that, or all practicing Muslims who understand Islam, because there are some Muslim that is deviant to the level that they wanted, or without realizing doing action that is like worshipping Muhammad SAW, when that is prohibited. So it's clear in Islam, La sharika lahu, right? There's no shirk upon you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Allah that we are submitting to. So he's saying that because the way he constructs his argument, he says both are saying submit to man, which is false. Islam doesn't say that. But from there, he says that we submit to a better man than Muhammad. That is the argument, right? But meaning fundamentally he have no real issue with submitting to men, just saying that Islam also promotes submitting to men, right? So even there, I can just shut down this video. He just, with this video opening statement, he just buried himself and his belief, anyway.
Over to another reason that Sneako gives for converting to Islam.
I like the fact that you pray 5 times a day, Islam. You're going to be more grounded. They take prayer more seriously than any other religion.
All right, now this is actually a really strange one, because not too long after he recorded this video, he asked for guidance in this area, and he said this.
I don't have the time to pray 5 times a day. Are you supposed to take all the steps fully? Are you supposed to fully dive into it, or can you, like, what's the next move?
So now, it's pretty strange that he cites praying 5 times a day as something that he likes about Islam, which is ironically the same thing that he thinks that he can't do. Now, I'm not sure if he realized...
It can still be possible. I'm not saying about Islam now. I'm saying about the person, right? It's still possible for someone to think that this is very good. If someone practices this, it gives them a good result. But at the same time, I'm struggle to fulfill this, right? I see it as such when the 2 clips is shown. Not that he have fundamental problem, is it? Like, why should I pray 5 times? Meaning, if someone says that, oh, I embrace Islam because they have 5 times a day prayer, and then at the other time says, but I don't like this. This is problematic. That's fundamental problem. But saying that this is good, but I'm having problem to comply, that's more of how should I deal with my, insufficient,
is that these prayers aren't prayers that spontaneously come from the heart. Instead, these prayers are just memorized sayings in Arabic, which is, of course, a language that Sneako doesn't understand. But if Sneako just likes a structure that comes with ritualized or memorized prayer, then he could have just stayed in his Catholic church, since they have recited prayer as well. I mean, unless he just likes the fact that they pray 5 times a day. Well, if that's the case, then there's no reason that he couldn't set a clock, get down on his knees, and pray 5 times a day as a Christian. So if this really was a reason for why he converted to Islam, then he shouldn't be a Muslim, since in Islam, he's obligated to pray 5 times a day. And he even said himself that he can't meet all his obligations since he doesn't have the time for it. So instead of embracing Islam, he really should just embrace Christianity. The next reason that Sneako consistently gives...
Does it mean that because you cannot comply with God's command, better stay with Christianity? Is that the underlying meaning? Meaning, yeah, even though you like what God have commanded you, and you think it's good for you, but you have problem to meet that requirement, so better stay in Christianity. You have the option, similar option, not compulsory. Yeah.
For why he rejects Christianity in favor of Islam is his problem with hierarchies.
Why I never felt like Christianity spoke to me. For example, like there's a hierarchy in Christianity. They have, well, in Catholicism, they have bishops, they have priests, they have the Pope. There's like a power structure, like politics in the religion, which makes no sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in Islam, there is none. It's just we're all equal. We're all God's children.
So here Sneako says that he has a problem with hierarchies in Catholicism and therefore converted to Islam since there are no hierarchies in Islam and we're all children of God. All right, lots of issues with this one. First off, to say that he likes the idea that we're all God's children in Islam rather than Christianity is exactly backwards. The idea that God is our father and we're his children comes straight from Christianity. In fact,
Yeah, if the point of argument is about we are his children, because I think most or many Christians that have, you know, the vocabulary is based on Christian teaching all their life, and then they become Muslim. Sometimes the way they phrase it is still based on how Christian phrase it, like we are children of God. Muslims do not say things like that, right? We are Abdullah, we are the servant of Allah. So it's different words. We never say children as such, right? So that's because I noticed when he said that because in the previous video there's the issue, there's the discussion about Dax Mandewell says about Quran says Allah do not have children, etc., right? So that's that discussion. I think his main point there, I'm not defending Sneako or anything, right? I'm just based on the clips. He's saying that the main thing is the hierarchy of the power in a religion. Hence I assume this Whaddo You Meme guy will address that, because just the issue of the children, I know for anyone who says I want to find a children where we are declared as children of God or God's children or something, then yeah, I would say yeah, go to Christianity, because that is the religion that teaches as such.
It's actually offensive to say such a thing in Islam since the best relationship that we can have with Allah is a slave-master relationship. Secondly, when it comes to talking about hierarchies,
yeah, Prophet Muhammad SAW is being called Abdihi, servant of Allah, referring to Allah, right? So the Allah's servant, and that is the highest regard for a human being. That is correct.
it really depends on what he means when he says that. Now, I'm not a Catholic, so I won't speak to that, but the answer that his Muslim friends gave him in response is virtually identical to the Christian position.
Although there will be levels, like for example, the imam or the sheikh will have a certain level, not over people in sight of God, but we listen to them because they have knowledge. People like the leader of the Islamic community, we listen to them because they're the leader. They were kind of put in place by God to make sure the community is safe, and they have responsibility. Just like a husband has responsibility for his wife and kids, there's a level of authority there. But it's not that, oh, he's better than us or God loves him more. You can have like a poor person who worships God, who's very loved by God because of their, devotion.
Okay.
Now, the only major difference here is that in Christianity, God loves you whether you're faithful to him or not, and if you're a believer or a non-believing sinner, which just isn't the case in Islam. So this means that if hierarchies are a problem for Sneako, then he should also reject Islam. And even more, since he likes the fact that we're all God's children, then he should not only reject Islam, but also embrace Christianity, since that's a Christian concept, not an Islamic one. But the next reason that he gives creates an even bigger problem for his conversion.
So yeah, I guess in Christianity, perhaps the one that can be, because it's like Catholic background, right? So I don't think other than Catholic there's a Pope figure, right? Because that is like, if you want to say hierarchy, I would say that signifies some kind of hierarchy if it is understood as that is part of the core faith, not just structural that is temporary, something like that, right?
What I like about Islam and why it's haram to draw Muhammad, and that's why I didn't really resonate with Christianity a lot growing up, because it's like all the images that they put of God. It doesn't make sense to me. We are not capable of visualizing what the creator of the universe looks like, what he's doing. Why is he in a cloud chilling with a beard? Why is he white? Why is God a dude? It doesn't make any sense. So there's no point in us even conceptualizing it, because we can never have the capability to.
No disrespect to the Catholics watching. I like the fact that Islam doesn't draw Muhammad, peace be upon him. You're not supposed to ever visualize that, because he was not alive in our time. There's no way that we would know what he looked like, especially Allah, God. He's never drawn. We have no idea what he looks like, or because there's no way. Humans are too stupid. We're not mentally capable of understanding what God would look like.
We can't conceptualize.
We can't conceptualize. So it's not supposed to. In Christianity, I'll grow up and you have like God on a cloud. And it's like this guy with a white dude on a beard. He's like laying in a cloud, and he's like putting his hand down. Like, why?
Is that really from Christianity, or is that just artistry? Because I've seen some images there. I do not want to make assumption. Is that because some Christian actually commented about this before, that just even though it is being depicted as such, no Christian actually believe that as it is. It's more of, I don't know, depiction, or what's the word? I forgot. But so number one, is it actually part of the teaching or part of the religion itself in any denomination of Christianity? That's number one. Number two, because here he actually lumped the two together in the sense that don't draw God and don't draw the prophet. To me, that is separate issue, because the discussion leading to that conclusion is very, very different. You cannot just put it together, because if it appear to be together, someone attack one, and because it's lumped together there, it's problematic to begin with, in my opinion.
So, as you just heard, he thinks that it's wrong to draw God or Jesus or Muhammad since we don't know what they actually look like. But if conceptualizing or visualizing God is a problem for Sneako, and not just backwards reasoning to come up with justification for why he's accepting Islam, then, once again, Sneako has some serious problems. The first reason why is because, according to some Islamic teachers,
Allah described in the Quran that he has a face. Allah described in the Quran that he has two hands.
And both of Allah's hands are right hands.
We believe that both of the hands of Allah are what? Huh?
The hadith says very clearly that both his hands are right.
The saqi refers to Allah's shin. So he has a leg.
The Quran says that Allah has one eye.
Read Surah Qalam, Surah number 68, ayat number 42. The shin of Allah is mentioned.
In fact, Sheikh Uthman, the one who brought Sneako to his first mosque, he believes that Allah has body parts as well, although Shooter gets pretty fuzzy when he's pressed on exactly what those body parts look like. But here's the thing, even as I played those clips, if Sneako were listening to those Muslim leaders describing Allah, then it would actually be impossible for Sneako not to conceptualize Allah. So in other words, he would be doing the very thing that he gave as a reason for why he rejects Christianity. So now, unfortunately, Sneako's in a bit of a dilemma. He can either accept or reject these teachers' interpretation of those passages in the Quran and the Hadiths. If he rejects their interpretation, then he would have to interpret those passages as non-literal representations of God, which is the very thing that everyone knows is true about the paintings that he's referencing. No one thinks that those...
So is that the accepted across the board in Christianity, that the depiction, the paintings, etc. is not literal? Not literal, right? As I meant. Is that how to accurately, so that I know that in Christianity it is as such? It's not literal, it's just imaginary, or I don't know.
Those are actually real depictions of what God is supposed to look like. But regardless, if Sneako doesn't like pictures of God, then he can still reject those since those aren't a feature of Christianity. It's not as if these...
Okay, so based on his statement here, that is not part of Christianity. It's just something that is not wrong, I guess, in Christianity. Otherwise, people would say that it's wrong, right? It's not part of the religion, but it's you can express your creativity, your imagery, I'm assuming.
Pictures are found in the Bible, or they're part of any Christian teaching. Obviously, the Bible doesn't say that God is an old white man. But on the other hand, if he does accept those Muslims' interpretations of Allah, then he should reject Islam since he's against conceptualizing or visualizing God. And not only that, but he should also accept Christianity because, even as Mufti Abdullah says, the Quranic depiction of Allah is far worse than God being pictured as a white man.
Honestly, that is not... They've got some picture of some kind of a gremlin.
Okay, those who make this kind of things, right? Na'uzubillah, ma'azallah, right? Obviously, it's not taking Islamic sources based on Islamic understanding. That enough said as such, right? I can understand non-Muslim that want to attack Islam searching through the Nas and pick up things to put together and then come with a certain image.
And last but definitely not least is perhaps the most absurd of them all. The fifth reason that he gives for rejecting Christianity and embracing Islam is the fact that the Bible's been changed and the Quran hasn't. But
by the way, another point about that is one fundamental about Laisa kamithlihi shay', right? That is accepted across the board, that there's nothing even same with the creation, meaning Allah is is unlike anything that we have seen, we have heard of, we can even imagine, etc., etc., etc. Right? So with that, umbrella concept, no one would actually. I understand. In terms of the approach of the Salaf, we do not extrapolate, interpolate, or interpret things. We just leave it as such. It is mentioned by the Quran or the Hadith as such. We just reiterate it as such. Don't visualize it. Don't whatever. Just leave it as such, right? So that's the approach. You cannot take what they say and suddenly apply a totally different approach of visualizing what they say, because their approach is very clear that we never imagine these things, we never can even imagine these things, but if the Prophet says something that we cannot understand beyond our comprehension, we just say it as such, leave it be, right? Case closed. So I think the problem, even within Muslim community, where they pick up two different approach, part of it, and put together to become some weird things. And unfortunately, the non-Muslim that want to attack Islam, jump on it. Of course, that's like, this is our chance to,
Probably wondering to yourself right now, why would that be the most absurd of all of his claims, since that's a claim that Muslims often make? Well, it's not the ignorance of the claim that makes it the most interesting, but instead it's the way that he argues for it. So the context here in this clip that I'm about to play is that Sneako is having a debate with Gideon on Islam and Christianity, and Sneako is coming across as if he literally doesn't know any of the basics of the Bible.
What's the chapter and verse of that?
Matt, verse 39.
What's the chapter?
I don't know. There's been so many different. There's so many different versions of the Bible, bro.
What other versions of the Bible are there?
There's so many, bro.
Okay, tell me some.
Okay, let's look up versions of the Bible. We have the King James Version, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard, the New English Bible.
You know the funny thing about all those different versions, Sneako?
What?
They're all just different translations, buddy.
But it gets worse.
Most people haven't read the original version. Have you heard of the Council of Nicaea? There's been a lot of chapters that have been removed, and the Bible's been tampered and manipulated with a lot over the years. Well, they did remove the Council of Nicaea from the original Bible. A lot of people haven't read those parts of the Bible.
Council of Nicaea? What you're saying there's a book called the Council of Nicaea?
Yeah.
There's not no book called the Council of Nicaea.
It's not a whole book, but it's. Let's see.
So, as you just heard.
So he have heard something. Because some Council of Nicaea is not a book or chapter or anything, right? If you want to say that it's an event, at least okay. But when he says a book, then that's quite interesting.
Sneako rejects the credibility of the Bible in favor of Islam because they removed the book of the Council of Nicaea from the Bible. Now, for anyone who knows literally anything about church history, they know that the Council of Nicaea is not a book, but instead it's a council. Now, ordinarily, it wouldn't be a big deal that he's ignorant on Christianity and Islam since he's a new convert, but that's not the point. The point is, this is a problem since the reasons that he converted are based on the ignorance of Islam and Christianity. So after taking a second to Google the Council of Nicaea, Sneako says this.
There's no book of... What?
There was a council called the Council of Nicaea that manipulated the original Bible.
All right, pause right there for a second, because what's so insane about this is that even on his screen, on the front page of his Google search, it says there is no historical basis for the idea that Nicaea established the canon and created the Bible. It's literally right there on his screen, and it's highlighted. And this means that not only is he not reading the screen, but it also means that he didn't even take the time to do a 2-second Google search on the Council of Nicaea before deciding that this was his reason for rejecting Christianity and embracing Islam. So now when it comes to his point about the Bible being changed at the Council of Nicaea, honestly, I feel bad for him. He's likely just repeating Muslim slogans about this, not realizing that this actually comes from a Dan Brown novel and not actual history. If anyone decides to go look up the actual history, then like Sneako, it would only take you really 2 seconds to learn that the Council of Nicaea literally had nothing to do with determining what books went into the Bible and what books didn't. In fact, the council wasn't even about the books of the Bible. Instead, it was about the Arian heresy. So honestly, I think that Sneako was misled here by some Muslim apologists who either knew or should have known better. But again, let's be charitable, because I'm a charitable guy and I'm feeling really charitable today. So let's say that Sneako was right that they actually did remove books from from the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. Well, the problem with that claim is that we literally have tens of thousands of quotes from church fathers citing the scriptures long before, and we have dozens of manuscripts from before the Council of Nicaea was even a thought. So if someone really did change the Bible at the Council of Nicaea, then it would be pretty easy for textual critics to know what they changed and to fix it. We wouldn't be relying on the Council of Nicaea to know what was in the Bible anyway. And of course, when it comes to the Old Testament.
Now, what he just said there, it will be interesting because someone used similar argument against the Quran with respect to the event of Uthman. Because the way he refuted, the idea that it can be manipulated and no one would know and realize and everyone just accept it. The same argument would, defeat those who argue as if, there's various Quran and then with this event, you make it into one, those kind of accusation.
Then Sneako has also been deceived in believing that the Old Testament was changed as well, when in reality, history once again shows us that it wasn't. For a long time, the earliest manuscripts of the Old Testament that we had were from the 10th century AD. But once we found the Dead Sea Scrolls
10th century AD.
in 1947, we found Old Testament manuscripts that were more than 1,000 years older than the ones that we previously had. So of course, this gave us the opportunity to see if the Old Testament manuscripts that we had been changed or not. But once we compared them with one another, they proved to be virtually exact. So not only do
now, that's the thing, right? Because the Bible is mainly looked upon as historical text. And from historical text, I can understand that discussion, right? If we somehow suddenly found some scripture, we found it somewhere, right? And then we date it back to whatever year. So from historical perspective, that is taken as a valid thing there, right? From my perspective, in terms of, is it an interesting historical text? Yes, sure. Just like any other historical text, we treat it the same. But if you want to see that, so we should put faith into this, that our salvation should be based on to this, my level of the burden of evidence is not simply just as if it is enough to be considered as historical text, if you understand. Because even if a text we found can be traced back to the time of Noah, for example, Adam or Noah, right, very early on, at the beginning of humankind, or just a bit later, right? How do we know exactly who wrote it for sure that this is actually from God back then, or someone else copied? And meaning those questions is actually what I'm interested to know, because we cannot verify that, right? From historical text, we don't go there, because otherwise we cannot even hypothesize what have happened throughout human history, right? So it's different purpose and different level of acceptance in terms of evaluation. But if you say that, put your face onto it, my level of evidence would be totally different. Hence, that's why it's very hard to match the level of evidence in the Hadith and of course in the Quran.
We know that the New Testament wasn't changed, but we also know that the Old Testament wasn't changed either. And by the way, Sneako, if you're watching this, I'd love to have a conversation with you in private or in public about this, so reach out to me if you're interested. Sneako then goes on to argue that the reason why he converted to Islam is because there's only one Arabic Quran that hasn't been changed at all.
You know what book has never been manipulated? You know what book has no 30 different versions of it?
What book?
The Quran. Stay consistent for 1400 years. I'm just giving you a reason why I believe in the Quran more, because I can be certain that this hasn't been tampered with. But the original text of the Quran has never been tampered with, has never been manipulated.
The original text, that's if someone says that and he imply text on the paper, personally I would say that, are you certain? Because the way it is being written actually have also evolved. What we have right now, the way of writing this, is something that is not existent not in existence in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? There's no dot, etc. There's no and even the classic books in Arabic, I have my friend that actually learn Arabic, they can read it, I cannot. I need to have that notes to say is it a or u or e, something like that, right? So the way text it's written, I think for those who propagate that, I think that's problematic, because for those who actually take it as a fact, then suddenly when someone shows it, no, prior to that the way it's written is different or something, they would have a problem. Not because it is a problem in the first place, but because the thing that they assumed is not actually accurate. So that's the issue with, if someone actually assume as such when they say, this text have never been changed. Because if you understand that as how it is written, I think that's very problematic to understand it as such. If you understand it as how it is being relayed from the beginning until now, then yeah, for sure.
And this is the one that you could always go to. It's the same, it's consistent for 1,300 years.
And I was planning on responding to this claim to show how, once again, this should cause him to reject Islam and to embrace Christianity. But then I thought, you know what? I know someone who could answer this claim far better than I could. And so I called my friend David Wood and I asked him if he would cover this point. And let me tell you, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse for Sneako, then comes David's video. Go ahead and click here to see what I mean. And the next time that you give reasons for converting to Islam without understanding Islam or Christianity, what are you going to say?
Alright, so that's it for today. I think I have said what I can say with respect to what was presented here. Of course, the whole thing here is about the reason of the person, the exact, the specific person convert. Of course, many people, the reason why I like to watch and react to videos about people converting is because I want to understand their reasoning. I've seen a lot of videos about people converting to Islam. I've seen a lot of videos people leaving Islam, converting to Christianity, embraces atheism. Why? Because I really want to understand what's the process in their mind for them to make that decision, right? So, just because I agree with, or not to say I agree, but just because I understand the reasoning of people getting into Islam or leaving Islam or something like that, doesn't mean that it is automatically the truth or it's automatically the false. Yeah, but it is interesting to see how people making decision in their life, sometimes because of information, sometimes because of misinformation, sometimes because of personal experience, sometimes because of many different things. That is what fascinates me. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you next time.